Hi guys, welcome back to our channel, Nise Thinks. This is Yasin and Shubun bringing you our latest installment. In case we forget, don't forget to, at the end of this video,
like, subscribe and share to get more of our content.
Okay, so Yasin, what are we talking about today?
Today I thought we'd cover colorism as it pertains to the colored community and more specifically to gay men or people in the LGBT community.
Okay.
How that impacts us.
You know, colorism is an interesting topic for me because at first I thought, okay, colorism is just privilege based on your skin tone within a group. But it also extends to beyond that group. And I thought of such a slippery thing, like, do you define it based on privilege? Do you define it based on markers of beauty? Do you define it based on people being discriminated within an ethnic group based on their skin tone? How do you define colorism?
I think for me, colorism is essentially the sum total of privileges that certain people can access based on their proximity to attributes of whiteness. So that kind of covers it conceptually for me. And for you?
But do you think it's just about whiteness though? Because I also find in a way that proximity to whiteness is reached because you're putting people from your own group down based on something you have access to and they don't. So does it also involve some degree of self-hate?
I wouldn't say direct self-hate, but I would say the markers for what constitutes aesthetics and beauty are via the white gaze.
So when you talk about it, it reminds me of this concept by Fanon, and I think Du Bois also talks about double consciousness, but I'm going to stick with Fanon because it's what I know. This idea of the split self, right? So you look at yourself through the colonial gaze and all those markers of blackness that comes to mean everything defiled and other you come to hate and you come to work against. Does that kind of resonate with you at all?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think for me, what's interesting is that, if you look at the two of us, I'm lighter skinned than you, and yes, that impacts how you experience the world. I know I wasn't always aware or conscious of it, but after we spoke about it and we shared our experiences on it, I realized that for you, a lot of what I take for granted, a lot of those things are invisible to me.
What's interesting? How many things just came to be the norm? For me, being followed through a shopping mall or a shop, for instance. Being not being considered as attractive because of my darker skin somehow. Particularly in gay spaces, but then I've also realized that in a way dark skin also sometimes is hypersexualized, in as much as it's looked down upon for not being attractive. When it's packaged in terms of a black man specifically in the gay community, it becomes a symbol of the caricature of the buck, the big black man who's now an object of sexual desire, but also danger to some extent.
He's trade, he's sexy, he's dangerous. He's going to mess up your life, but he's going to give you good sex.
And I can access that in some spaces, but not to the degree to which my taller brothers can access it, I can access it in terms of if I speak a certain way and throw my accent a certain way, then I become that symbol of danger, particularly to a white man.
I think, so I think colorism kind of impacts me. I would say it's weird. For me, it's a combination of colorism and featureism. So, for example, I'm light enough not to have connotations of blackness, right? Which privileges me in a racist society like South Africa. But at the same time, my features clearly mark me as the racial other here. So
just kebas.
So I'm clearly bounded by that. So for example, often I find that if I'm in a clothing store and I'm browsing, There's usually a white woman that will tap me on the shoulder and ask me to pick out something that she's looking for.
She thinks you work there.
Because literally by her looking at me, not seeing a tag or anything like that, she assumes that I'm working there.
Now, gebastheid is a problematic term which
Yeah.
means being mixed of somewhere or miscegenation.
Yes. So yeah.
It finds its root also in this idea of scientific racism.
So yeah, but technically we are both gebas, we are both mixed race, we are both Creole, right?
So I wouldn't call myself mixed race, but I would call myself of mixed heritage. You know what I mean? Because mixed race just kind of connotes that there were these equal parts that somehow were put together and they made me, and that kind of lends some sort of credence to this idea on race and racial essentialism.
Yeah, no, you know, and like we spoke about before, there's this double bind with regards to speaking about race, right? So we know that race is a social construct, and we understand that it has very real impacts on the lives of people in terms of how they are racially placed. But we also know that as a construct, it was meant to serve a very specific purpose, not necessarily division, but it was really to divide who was going to do the labor and who was going to generate profits for the white business class. So for me, speaking of race is a double bind because
It's not a double bind, but it's a necessity, right?
No, it's definitely a necessity, but the danger is always to you run the risk of falling into racial essentialism, where you run the risk, especially as a colored person, you run the risk of becoming what I call a colored hotep. Right? So you become that colored hotep who looks for your koi roots and your sand roots, to legitimize your claim to being South African.
Idea of authenticity.
Yes.
Almost.
So it's to legitimize you and to legitimize your claim to being South African and African.
But it still plays into those ideas of blood purity.
Yeah, but that very notion that you are this, you can trace your lineage to this pure root is a white supremacist
And
construct.
no such utopia exists.
Yeah, so that very movement of seeking that essentialist root is a white supremacist
But
construct.
let's just look back to colorism quickly, because I was thinking about, we were talking about trade, you know, and this idea of the tall, dark guy, the black guy who presents this element of danger, but is also hypersexualized. And I mean, I don't want to speak for anyone's experience, but the big joke is that darker skinned women of color don't get to occupy the same idea of, of being desirable. Have you noticed that?
What do you mean by not being desirable?
They're not marked as sexually desirable in the same way with darker skin.
No, I agree, 100%. But then just bringing it back to my own lived experience, I think for me it's very much featureism and yes, colorism in relation to people who are closer in proximity to whiteness than I am.
But then here's also another...
Where it impacts me.
There's an additional point now, we're talking about featureism. I mean, I had a friend from the States who used to say to me that, yeah, my skin is dark, but my green eyes give me a degree of privilege that people with my darker skin and dark eyes and curly hair would not have.
Yeah, no, so definitely there are degrees of this hierarchy. So I wouldn't even call it a spectrum, because a spectrum implies something even that's distributed, but rather for me, I would place this in a hierarchy of desirability, right? So this idea that little details like lightness of eyes, you know, having beautiful colored eyes would lend you an attractive...
So even your description of it is beautiful there.
Yeah.
The one word that you mentioned earlier on was trade. Did you ever feel like trade in the gay community?
No, I could never access that. I could never access that kind of title of trade or of being that kind of seen as that. First of all, because of my look, I do not look hypermasculine at all, and that's something that I've had to own. And that's
even
just...
when your body was snatched.
Oh yeah, back in the day when it was snatched, I could maintain that illusion to some extent of, you know, when I actually made the effort to build some muscle and stuff. So, but that was also something that was not sustainable. It was just not sustainable, and also it really placed me in a position where I had to maintain a construct of desirability that I just did not have the bandwidth.
And we both know age is a cruel mistress.
Yes.
You know, she brings wisdom, but she also brings social death sometimes in the gay community.
Yeah, she brings wisdom and she takes social death. It's like True Blood. You experience the true death at some point.
So even that kind of, what I realized is, in as much as I could trade on, okay, my body is looking good and I'm closer to that ideal of masculinity with my muscles, there's definitely a deadline.
Yeah.
And you know, on the wrong side of, I used to think it was 50, but it's actually even your later 20s. You over already to some extent, so you're not classified as trade anymore, and your darker skin makes you even more invisible to some extent. And now, as I listen to you talk, I'm thinking that even your lighter skin and your features that cast you as gebas to some extent, I think prisons you in a different way.
Yeah, no, definitely. So it's that weird kind of liminal space. But I guess I do have that privilege, and I need to own that. That yes, I do have that conventionally attractive kind of look, right? So I own that completely. But for me, it's just what's interesting, you know, hanging out at like a local gay bar. What's nice is right now you're seeing a lot of people with different body shapes and just different aesthetics. Excuse me. Just different aesthetics, hanging out and owning who they are and kind of experimenting with different looks and aesthetics.
So I'm finally at a place in my life where I feel liberated enough to play with it, you know, and to play with my appearance and to step away from this kind of, because you can't devoid or you can't kind of pull images of blackness away from the capitalist context that we live in.
Yeah.
These images are also rendered valuable because they make money. And we see them. We see the image of the urban gangster, you know. We see the image of the strong black athlete in the media, and it makes money. So those types are rendered as these ideals that we need to live up to and we need to perform, and gay spaces aren't immune to them. And in the same way that I was punishing myself because of my distance to this kind of idealized whiteness, there was also that very white structure, the racist structure that I exist in, created these images of blackness that I was also supposed to live up to. And I'm only slowly now in the present starting to deconstruct that and say, well, why can't I be a black goth? Why can't I be an Afro-punk? What is that? Are those also images that are rendered valuable? Yes, I agree they're rendered valuable in a different way, but I do find them more inclusive. And if we bring the conversation back to colorism, then of all skin types and skin tones within this larger kind of social collective that is POC. Yeah, so what do you guys think about this? Please share your comments in the comment section below. Any ideas, any feedback on this topic? You know, what do you guys think about where you sit in the hierarchy of privilege with regards to colorism? How has having darker skin impacted you? Share with us all of those details. So I think that concludes our chat for today. Thank you for joining us. We hope to see you next time. And remember to like, subscribe, and share. So the more you like our content, the more you subscribe, etc., it's really going to help us out. So thank you for listening, and we'll chat to you guys soon. Bye bye. See you next time. Bye bye.